It's nice to be liked, but more important is that people feel that you are like them. And in a world where more and more people don't feel understood or listened to, that'll help you stand out so fast because people are drawn to that like a magnet.
Welcome back to Conversations That Grow, the show where we explore how the right conversations can shape our business, leadership, and even how we see the world. I'm Sada Fainin, and today I'm joined by the brilliant Michael Davis. As the founder of Speaking CPR, Michael helps coaches, speakers, and business leaders communicate with more impact. And one of the biggest lessons he teaches is something most of us think we're good at, but usually aren't. That's listening. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind words. Could you tell my kids you think I'm brilliant?
Sure, line them up.
Because they question me a lot. Thank you for that.
Fantastic. No, you're welcome. Michael, to kick things off, what's a conversation you had that changed the way you think about leadership or business?
It was one of the first conversations I had about the importance of reaching out to your clients. And the gentleman said, reach out to your top 20 clients. I was a financial advisor at the time, and he said, ask them what's the number one reason you do business with me and why do you continue to do business? 90% of them came back and said, you're a good listener. Stunned me. I had no idea. But I took from that leadership, yes, I was a financial advisor, but I'm in a leadership position leading people about their money. And it changed the way I saw myself. And now, from that point forward, I realized I have to live up to that reputation. So I worked harder to become an even better listener. So when somebody labels you, if they say you're brilliant, now I got to go out and do brilliant things. So it's an example. But as a good listener, I said, I've got to increase my skills. So I studied it and learned it's not just about saying a lot and yeah, that's good. Now you've got to demonstrate by showing people you heard what they said, or if you're not clear, ask questions. Look for clarity. That's an important part of listening. And that's all about leadership.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so love that you asked them the question. I think that's such a great thing to do because, as you say, you learned so much about yourself. It's that self-awareness, isn't it?
Sure is.
And but I'm curious, why did he ask you to do that?
To deepen our relationships and to know. Part of it was a marketing conversation. He said, you need to know how the market sees you so that you can take that out into the marketplace, and it impacts how you message yourself. There was a lot of wisdom from that one exercise.
Yeah. And where did you go from there?
I didn't go out and tell people, hey, I'm a great listener. What I did, I was learning storytelling at the time also. That's what I do now, is story and speech coaching. I learned how to incorporate that into my storytelling, where I didn't tell people, hey, I'm a good listener. My clients in my client stories would say, one of the reasons we hired you is because you listened to us. Several couples back then, when I was working primarily with husband and wife couples, told me they hired me because I actually listened to the wife.
Interesting.
To me, it was just everyday common sense courtesy. And also because I understood the dynamics of financial planning and lifespan. I talked to several men back then who weren't good listeners, especially to women, and said, you're stupid because your potential client or your client 88% of the time is going to be that woman sitting across from you who's going to outlive her husband. You better start having a conversation and developing a relationship with the woman.
That's quite insightful. Michael, what was going through your head when you heard their answers?
The first few times I'm like, really? Tell that to my ex-wife. But I was surprised. But the more I heard it, I thought, okay, my reaction wasn't a surprise anymore. It was, okay, clearly I'm doing something here that I didn't even realize. I had to start investigating, what am I doing in these meetings? How am I listening? How am I demonstrating that I'm listening? And I wanted to make sure I repeat that. As a speech coach now, when I work with people, whenever I give them feedback, my first goal is to tell them what they did well. Because if nobody tells you you're doing something well, you'll stop doing it. In those conversations, my clients were telling me, you're doing this well. Now it was up to me to go figure out, okay, what am I doing exactly? So I started being more aware of how I was listening in future meetings. And that just helped make me a better listener beyond that point.
That's fascinating. How did that moment change the way you thought then about your business? And I mean, obviously communication, you've touched on that a little bit.
Not that I was transactional before, but living in a world, the financial world, which despite what they say, they're very transactional. It forced me, or I shouldn't say it forced, it inspired me to go deeper with relationships and realize you have to slow down the process to speed it up. Meaning, you got to slow down long enough to listen, ask questions, go deeper. Don't just take the first answer people give you. To understand them. That deepens relationships because people realize, especially in today's year 2025, everything's so fast-paced and transactional. Let's get it done. You go to the doctor, you're in and out in 6 minutes. When you slow that down, you're showing people you're important. This relationship, this conversation is important to me. But you don't say that because everybody says that. You demonstrate it by taking the time not to have to, waiting for the person to stop talking so you can say something important. It's gaining clarity and understanding.
Yeah. You mentioned before about listening well. What would you say are some of the ways that you can listen well, that someone can listen well?
Go into a conversation without an agenda. First order of business. Don't go in with a memorized script if you're a salesperson or a leader. Don't go in memorized. Go in open and be ready to, now I'm going to contradict myself. You have to go in if you're a presenter or a speaker, leader into a meeting. You got to have an organized idea, an outline of what you're going to say. Mm-hmm. When I say script, I mean, don't go with a memorized verbatim, I'm going to say this, this, and this, because that's so inauthentic. But also be ready to throw out the script, throw out your prepared remarks. If you're listening to people in the room and it sounds like this is not what I anticipated, they need something completely different from me, you have to have the courage and the confidence to say, all right, we're not going to talk about my prepared agenda. We need to talk about what's important to you.
And how do you demonstrate that's something else you mentioned?
How do I demonstrate it? I often will take something that people tell me, and this goes back to your previous question, how do you prepare? Be aware of the filter that you and I and everyone else has. I hear a term, and I immediately run it through my filter and start making assumptions. This happens at a microsecond level, right? You say to me, I want to be better when I speak in front of a crowd. Well, I hear the word crowd. As a speech coach and a professional speaker, I might think, oh, she's talking about 500, 1,000, 2,000 people. And I start giving you advice and find out at the end of the conversation, to you, a crowd was 5 people. All right. My advice may not be proper for what you need. Mm-hmm. So my first step is to say, when you say crowd, Sadaf, what does that mean to you? Always aim for clarity. Don't assume the terms we hear in our everyday conversations or what people mean. This is especially true on interpersonal communications. In our homes, we get so used to one another, we're trying to shortcut the conversation process. We know what our partner said. We know what they meant. No, that's the most important conversations where we have to slow it down and get clarity. What exactly do you mean by, fill in the blank, whatever term or phrase they used?
As you were talking, I was thinking that we often go into that mode of trying to seek clarity when we are trying to solve a problem. So if someone's telling us about an issue they've got or they're struggling with something, so you listen with the intent to help them through what they're going through. How do you listen well when it's not a problem-solving kind of a situation?
Well, a good habit to get into, and I'm still working on this after 62 years, is think about it in our home lives when a partner or a child, family member comes to us, or a friend. A good question we should be asking them is, do you want me to help you solve this problem, or do you just need someone to listen? As business leaders, we may have that. Sometimes people just need to get something off their chest. Well, let's get that clarity up front. Because if somebody comes into your office, for example, and they just need to vent for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, but you're hearing it as an opportunity to solve a problem, they're going to walk out unfulfilled. And so are you as a leader. You're going to think, well, they didn't respond. I gave them advice. Well, that's not what they wanted. So get clarity right up front. What is the purpose of this conversation?
Yeah, I like that. I think what I'm gathering from what you're saying, and I appreciate, is that when we're speaking with someone and communicating with them, it's really becoming a student of them to really understand what it is they're trying to say. Because sometimes it's hard to get everything out, isn't it? And it's also picking up the nonverbals and reading between the lines. And there's an element of, when you talk about getting clarity, it's that element of asking the right questions to draw that out.
Absolutely. And what you just said, Sadaf, is so important. I can't pay attention to your nonverbals, your tone of voice, if I'm thinking, okay, I got to say this next. When is she going to stop talking? I have something important to say. And we all fall into the trap if we're not careful, but just take a breath. But just as an aside, you're a very good interviewer. I've been on almost 100 podcasts, and you're thoughtful, and I can tell you're listening to things I'm saying. You're asking questions, and you do a follow-up. You're demonstrating what most of us should be doing in our conversations.
Thank you, Michael. That's very kind.
You're welcome. Well, again, you're doing something well. I pointed out to you. But no, you really do demonstrate what we're talking about here. You're not rushing the process. You don't have this checklist of questions. You're in the moment. That's ideal conversation.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to what you were saying about asking your clients the questions, and then they responded with saying that, you're very good at listening. And you talked about, you kind of went back in your mind, like, what do I do that makes it so good? And so my question is, like, after realizing how important listening was, how did you start intentionally then developing that skill?
I would walk into meetings, and it's carried over to this day, 25 years later, where I say, I don't have an agenda. Don't go in with a list of questions. Just go in and, what does that mean? This is a question I'm constantly in the back of my mind, always asking. And sometimes I'll verbally ask the other person, and I'll say it different ways, but whatever answer I get, if I'm not clear, what does that mean? And it's the habit I've built up over the years. And if you're watching this interview, if you take nothing else from this conversation, aside from Sadaf's wonderful interview style, create the habit of asking yourself that question, what does that mean? And if you're not clear, then it's on you to ask the other person, what specifically do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think open, honest, clear communication is just so important for every area, whether it's your business, whether it's your home,
Oh, absolutely.
all the time.
Look, I know I'm jaded when I say this, but I believe every business problem, every personal problem, it all comes back to some type of miscommunication. Expectations. I work with groups of I do group training mostly now with companies, and one of the first things we do is here are the expectations. What are your expectations of me? And I always ask them first. Here are my expectations of you. And usually I will bring them additional expectations they should have of me. But let's just right up front, let's be clear. And that way, if there's any miscommunication, we can take it back to, all right, somehow the expectation was violated.
Michael, when we were having our pre-call a few weeks ago, you mentioned the mental movie maker. I'd love for you to tell us a bit more about that.
Sure, this gets into storytelling. One of the big challenges I see in speaking and communicating, selling, is that a lot of speakers are still giving facts, figures, and information. Look, I'm not the first person to point this out, but we don't need you for facts, figures, and information because this little device right here can give it to me faster than ever, especially now with AI. What we need from you is an experience when we present. So the mental movie maker is activating that part of our brain that starts to see a movie in our mind's eye. If I'm telling a story, I want to create the emotion, which means I'm going to activate what I call the storytelling codes. That's where we're activating cortisol, oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins, and serotonin. We also activate what one of my coaches taught me is a term we call vaccinate your speech or vaccinate your story. Involve the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, the smell, and the taste. Use dialogue. When you use all these elements in storytelling, people can't, it's humanly impossible to not have that activated because what's happening is you're tapping into their experiences. So one of my signature stories involves me being a 6-year-old little boy being punished in first grade. And it is a rainy November afternoon, and you can hear the rain pelting the steel roof. And the lights are turned off in my first grade class, and all the kids are resting their heads on their desks. All but one, that's me standing on top of my desk. Because as my teacher, Mrs. Grimm, said earlier that day, since you love being so disruptive in my class, I'm going to let you stand up in front of everyone today on top of your desk. Now, did you start to create an image in your mind?
Absolutely.
Was your mental movie maker activated? Now, I didn't over detail it. So I'm not sure. What did you see in your mind as I was telling that?
So in my mind, I saw a classroom and desks that looked very much similar to mine when we were little and in school. So it was very similar to that picture. And everyone's heads were down with, in their arms on their desks while you were standing at on your desk, but probably not that proud and happy with yourself. It was more of a situation where you were being told off and put down.
I wanted the earth to swallow me up and take me away forever. How many kids were in the room that you saw?
About 15.
15? Okay.
We had a small school.
Well, here's the thing. The reality is there were probably 30 kids in the room, but that doesn't matter.
No.
Because if I had said there were 30 kids in the room, I shut down your ability to see the image because your experience was 15. And the number of the kids in the room didn't matter. one of my mentors, Mark Brown, says, my story is about me, but it's for you. Mm. The goal of the story isn't really my experience. It's tapping into yours. The external was, you see the kids, it's dark, there's 15 desks in the room, etc. But it also started to tap into your emotions. Oh, that poor kid. Either that happened to you, something that embarrassed you, or empathy for me. Either way, we're making an emotional connection. And it all comes from activating that mental movie maker, not still images, but the movies themselves. And we all do it when we tell stories. Some people are just better at it than others.
That's incredible. Would you say then that it's about the story resonating with the listener?
Absolutely. A story should never be a series of facts. Mm. Like if you're just going to give facts and information, that's not a story. Just put it on a PDF and send it to people. They can read it faster than you can tell it. Mm. It's taking them into those moments where people can feel it with you. And if the story is properly structured and taps into the correct emotions for that audience, they're going to go on this journey with you, and you're going to inspire in them two things. Number one, hope that the problem that they're facing, they can overcome. I say two things. It's really just one. It's that. It's hope. But there are a lot of elements that go into that. You've got to know your audience, which goes back to listening. You have to do your research. What are their concerns? Maybe call some of them before, if you can get a hold of people who will be in your audience if you're a speaker. As a leader, know the people in your room. What are the challenges they're facing? Because once you know that, you can structure your stories to match where they are.
Do you have to be a great storyteller to get a similar response from your audience?
We define great storyteller.
I mean, what you just did there, that was great. Like as you were saying, you didn't say 30 because you didn't want to put something in my head that wasn't naturally, that where I wasn't naturally going. Mm-hmm. But you wanted me to feel it. You wanted me to have all my senses involved in it so that I could, really be a part of that journey that you were drawing out, and to be able to take lessons and some gold nuggets, whatever it is, away from that. Is there, I guess, like if someone's not a natural storyteller, can they still be good at communicating and listening and being a good leader?
Yes. Now I understand. First of all, there's a myth that great storytellers are born. They're not. I was not a great storyteller. In fact, the reason I got into speech coaching is because when I was 31 years old, I was a financial advisor. My boss sat me down and said, hey, I'm sorry to tell you this, you're a lousy speaker. Because I was out doing workshops and seminars. And he said, fix this or else. Mm-hmm. Very supportive, loving guy. So out of desperation, I went and joined this group called Toastmasters. Mm-hmm. If you're watching this, you don't know what Toastmasters is. It's a group that helps people become more confident speakers. Well, that was my first step on this journey that started 31 years ago to becoming the kind of speaker who's confident and who can tell stories. I had no idea how to do that. There are processes, there's neuroscience behind how do you effectively structure stories and speeches so that people lean in and they're taken into your journey with you and they want to go from start to finish. But most people don't know those. They think that speaking is just getting up and talking.
Yeah.
I think that storytelling is just giving a bunch of facts. This happened and this happened and this. No, that's not effective storytelling. We can all do that. If you're watching this from this day forward, every time you listen to a speaker who captivates you, ask yourself that question. What was so captivating about that? Why was I drawn in? You're going to find that there was an emotional response because they created just enough detail in the scene to make you feel like you were in it with them, got that emotional response and went on the journey with them. And hopefully there was an effective, important message at the end that you could take with you. Mm. It is a learnable skill.
That's good to know.
Yes.
Mm. What does this look like in a business setting? So if you're a leader in your business and you're finding maybe your style of communicating is getting in the way of real listening and understanding between your team. Mm-hmm. How can you start on this journey of becoming a better communicator, better storyteller, better listener?
It's an excellent question, and it starts with understanding the questions that are in people's minds when you talk to them. Whether you're talking to a room of 5, 15, 105, doesn't matter. Mm. These are some of the questions that people have that they typically will never ask. Number one is it safe? Mm. I don't mean physical safety, but psychological safety. Is this person going to threaten how I see myself? That leads to, is this somebody I can trust? Do you understand me? Do you understand my problems, my situation? And if you understand me, do you have a solution to my problems? Do you have a specific solution? Mm. So knowing that what's going on in their heads, I'm constantly coaching my clients. Think like your audience. Sadaf, you and I, and you watching this, we all have the similar problem. It's called the curse of knowledge. We know our topics and our stories so well, we don't know what it's like not to know them anymore. Our audience is hearing this for the first time many times. Again, audience could be a one-to-one sales situation. So if I say audience, it could be all these different situations. We've got to think like our audience. Am I using terms, phrases? Am I saying things in my stories that they're not going to get the reference?
Yeah.
You know, this interpersonal communication. My partner and I, sometimes she will say to me, I'm telling her a story, and she's like, well, you left out those 5 parts. I said, but honey, remember, I'm a communications expert, supposedly. But our interpersonal relationships is the best place to test these ideas.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
But it's shut that knowledge off and say, what do they think? How could they be seeing this? And it's very hard to do ourselves. That's why we need other people to look at our presentations and stories for us to say, that doesn't make sense. I don't understand this. This is the biggest challenge I have. I'm going through these speeches and stories and I'm telling people, I don't know what this means.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I know your boss said that to you about you being a terrible speaker. And it's not nice to hear, but it's actually quite a gift when someone is so honest with you to help you out there.
He did me a huge favor. I wouldn't be doing what I do today if not for his very between the eyes commented. Yeah, he said it much more harshly, by the way.
Yeah,
I made it G-rated for this conversation.
Oh dear. Michael, I know you work with a lot of leaders. So in your experience, why do you think so many leaders think they're good listeners but still miss the mark?
I think a lot of times they get just good enough results. Mm. Mm. And it boils down to that. We're in such a business is numbers driven. Did you hit your numbers? Mm. And they go to the old school way of management leadership so they get the numbers. But unfortunately, they don't know what numbers they're missing because they're not as effective as they could be. Mm. I love the stories about companies who sit down and have conversations, who have leaders who don't even worry about a title, maybe don't even have an office separate from everyone else. They're in there working in the trenches with their teams. And you just see massive growth because everybody's on the same page. But I think mediocrity. If it's just good enough, we're happy. We've pleased the shareholders. Let's just move on and do it the way we've always done it. And that's not effective.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Is what you're saying that it's more of like, give me the facts and the figures that I need to do the next step or to take the next step or move from here to there. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, a lot of times that's what it is. And people, I hear this a lot. Well, storytelling has no place in business. Well, that's ridiculous. And I'll tell you why. Because human beings in business or outside of business, we are emotional creatures.
Absolutely.
This is proven by science. 2/3 of our communication is storytelling in some format throughout every day. Business, personal, doesn't matter. Doesn't it make sense if that's 2/3 of our communication that we learn to do it in a way that appeals to the human brain? I mean, there are 8 factors that go into an effectively structured story that if you do it in these 8 in order, the listener can't help but be involved. Their mental movie maker cannot be turned off.
Yeah.
It's a human reaction. So why aren't we doing this? Well, because we think it's about numbers and get to the bottom line, when the truth is the story slowing down just enough to tell a story so that the numbers make sense will speed up the process, gain us more clients, gain us more followers.
Yeah. You said about storytelling appealing to the human brain. That makes so much sense, because if you can appeal to your team, you're going to get the trust and the loyalty out of them. That's going to go much farther than the project you're working on at that time.
Yeah, it's the leader who's willing to show that being real. The authenticity to say, look, I may be in this position, but I understand yours because of this, and they tell the story of when they were in that same position, or a lesson they learned from a grandparent or a parent, which is applicable here. When you show people you're like them, they're much more drawn to you.
Yes.
There's that old saying in sales, people do business with who they know, like, and trust. Okay, it's nice to be liked, but more important is that people feel that you are like them, which means, oh, you understand me. Yeah. And in a world where more and more people don't feel understood or listened to, that'll help you stand out so fast. Because people are drawn to that like a magnet.
Yeah. Yeah, that relatability is so strong.
That's it. Yeah.
I guess I'm trying to figure out why more leaders don't, take that time to connect and to relate and to invest in that kind of way with their teams. And do you think it's got to do with time pressures, so they feel just so driven that there's like deadlines, there's so much to accomplish in such a short amount of time, I don't have time to sit and have coffee with you and go deeper?
You hit it right there.
Is that
we
right?
are so, I held this little device up before. This has changed the game. All this technology, we feel rushed, pulled, drawn in all these different directions. We're getting binged and peeped and all this.
Yeah.
I hear this a lot from people. I don't have the time to learn this skill. And my counter to that is you don't have the time not to.
Yeah.
Because if you keep on this treadmill, then you're never going to improve your communication skills, and you're never going to get off of it. Whereas if you would learn how to do it effectively, listening, as you know, takes work. We get away from speaking and everything for a moment. Just listening, it is hard work. The days of the week when I'm exhausted come after I've done 3 or 4, maybe 5 coaching calls. I'm done because it's exhausting. It's rewarding, but it's like you got to be willing to learn the skill. And I think it all comes back to a lot of people sit off just think it's good enough.
Yeah. Unfortunate, but love that you're working with people to help them become better at this.
Absolutely.
With the people that you have been working with, what's one simple shift that you help them make to make them better listeners?
Mastering the art of silence. This is a contradiction, or it sounds like a contradiction, but the most important part of a speech, presentation, or anything you're doing is silence. Because it's in the silence that people start to experience the implication of what you say. It gives them time to answer the questions you ask. Also gives them time to laugh if you say something funny. But part of the listening is, and because, again, the devices have made it to where most people, and I see this with younger generations, they struggle with silence. Watch this in the next meeting you're in. If somebody asks a question and the presenter is skilled enough to stop talking for several seconds, somebody will break the silence. They can't take it. And it's gotten worse as time has gone on because we're just surrounded by noise.
Yeah.
The speaker who has the confidence to slow it down and listen to what's going on in the room. The communicator, the leader who can get comfortable. And the only way you do that is you got to practice silence.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time in their presentations, I want you to stretch it out to where you feel like you're going to have a nervous breakdown. You got to get comfortable with that right there. And the person who can do that will become the better listener, leader, and presenter.
That's gold. I love it. And, to add to what you were saying, I think even the person who is doing the speaking, when you're silent, it lets them hear back in their head what they've just communicated and allows them to process that. And I think that makes so much, that helps make such a better, more constructive conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
Both are hearing well.
Yeah, and it activates the mental movie maker.
Yes.
If I make a point that, imagine you're standing on stage in front of 500 people. You're confident.
Yeah.
Are you starting to picture it? The way most people do that, imagine you're standing on stage, you're in front of 500 people, and they're clapping, and they're responding to you. And I'm not giving you time because I didn't stop long enough for you to picture it.
Michael, this has been such a great conversation. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but thank you so much for sharing your story, the lessons that you've been learning and have learned, and reminding us that growth really does start when we listen well.
Absolutely. Thank you for demonstrating that through.
Oh, you're very welcome. Michael, before we wrap up, if our listeners want to connect with you and learn more about Speaking CPR, where can they go to do that?
You can go to speakingcpr.com. I also have a complimentary resource called 52 Storytelling Insights. That's 52 Storytelling Insights. It will give you more wisdom about storytelling, but also part of that is just being a better communicator, listener, etc.
Fantastic. Thanks again for your time and being so generous.
Thank you.
And to those of you tuning in, thank you for joining us. You'll find all the links and details for Michael in the description. And if you're someone who's been thinking about using conversations to grow your own business, maybe even through a podcast, but don't have time to handle all the moving parts, that's exactly what we help with at podjunction.com. You can find out more at our website, podjunction.com, or just reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. So from Michael and from me, that's all for today. Bye from us, and I will see you next time.